Hi everyone, thanks for coming back. Today I wanted to do a quick video on the topic of the data store node. You could call this a data store or a data store node. And what's really interesting about this is that it can provide tokens anytime tokens are needed for your object flows. So let's see what will happen when we run this simulation as is without having a data store node. What you notice is it just timed out, and the reason is because this initialize activity is actually requiring another input from the pin that is called initialization parameters. So because this control flow provided another input token, it required that other input. However, because there was no inputs given to this action, there were no output tokens or objects that were sent across this object flow. So what happens is it said, well, I don't have the required inputs, therefore I will time out. So the interesting thing that you can do is use a data store node to actually continuously provide those tokens anytime they're needed. So if you go to the drop-down menu here, notice it says object node, but there is an option that is called data store node. So if we simply put this in as somewhat of a middleman or a middle person, what we can do is then have that provide tokens or objects anytime they are needed. And they will be stored there and those objects will be copied. So let's rerun this and watch what happens. So as you see, it's providing more object tokens anytime they are needed, every time this comes back around. So that is neat. I think there's a lot of useful ways to use that. That can actually hold values as well. So those values, maybe this is typed by a block that has other value properties. Those value properties would come along with that block every time that object is output from here. Now, another thing you can do, notice there's no name on this. You can either name this or you could simply drag in a block and then it will look something like this, which is great because then you have an idea of what it's actually going to be sending. And what's interesting is that you no longer see where it says data store. So I think that's one downside to doing this, but if you open up the specification for this, notice it still says data store node properties. So even though it doesn't show the words data store on the data store node, it actually is still a data store node, even though you simply dragged in a block and then now it's representing the name of that block. So that's also good to know. One other thing to understand about this is it does require that initial input. So if we were to simply delete everything from here, what you'll find is it does not create that object initially here. So it is not the same thing as doing what you would consider a create object action. So notice it's timing out because there's nothing being given as an input to that. So it does need that input, and when it has that input, it works very well. So I hope this has been helpful. If your team is in need of MBSE expertise, please feel free to reach out to STC and we would be happy to help. Also, we are an authorized reseller of Dassault Systems products such as CATIA Magic or Cameo Systems Modeler. So let us know if we can help with your team acquiring licensing if you are in need of licensing. Thanks a lot. Have a great afternoon.